The autumn wind, a sharp, restless beast, clawed through Central Park, brutally stripping the last defiant leaves from skeletal branches. James Reynolds, CEO of the tech behemoth Reynolds Quantum, pushed his daughter Emma's wheelchair along the uneven cobblestone path. The crisp air, redolent with damp earth and decaying foliage, did little to cool the inferno of turmoil within him. At 42, James possessed a fortune that could bend nations to his will. Yet his steely blue eyes, mirroring the cold September sky, reflected an unfillable, cavernous void. "Dad, can we stop by the duck pond, please?" Emma's voice, small but laced with a surprising resilience, pierced his bleak reverie. 10 years old, her spirit remained a stubbornly bright flame, a defiant contrast to the titanium and carbon fiber prison that had been her unwilling companion for 3 agonizing, eternity-stretching years. Her golden hair, a sunnier, more vibrant echo of her late mother's, was pulled back in a practical ponytail, revealing eyes that still, despite everything, searched for remnants of magic in a world that had systematically crushed hers with cold, hard reality. "Sure, sweetheart." James automatically glanced at his Patek Philippe, a finely honed reflex ingrained by years of relentless, unforgiving business schedules. "Just for a bit. I have a deluge of calls from Tokyo about the Ishikawa deal." Emma's smile, a fragile, fleeting thing, flickered, and the familiar resignation clouded her too knowing features. Since the catastrophic gymnastics accident that had stolen her mobility and the viciously aggressive cancer that had snatched her mother Sarah just a cruel year later, their shared existence had become a perilous tightrope walk over a chasm of unspoken grief, mutual fear, and suffocating loneliness. As they neared the pond, its surface a disturbed mirror of the gray sky, his encrypted phone vibrated insistently. Catherine, his sister Kiyo, and relentless conscience demanding an immediate update on the faltering Q-Wave initiative. Another 5-alarm fire at Reynolds Quantum. More fallout from the disastrous Jakarta project. He craved the distraction, the familiar controlled chaos of the corporate battlefield, a welcome if temporary retreat from the suffocating silent weight of his personal wreckage. Suddenly, a figure darted from behind a colossal ancient oak, its gnarled branches reaching like arthritic fingers directly into their path. A young woman barely 19, her dark hair tangled and matted clothes worn to threadbare transparency. But her hazel eyes, God. Those eyes burned with an unsettling, almost painful intensity. She knelt swiftly, her dirt-stained hand surprisingly gentle, reaching towards Emma's inert leg. "Hey, get away from my daughter." James roared a primal sound, yanking the wheelchair back so violently Emma gasped. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Security!" He bellowed, his voice echoing across the manicured lawns, though no guard was immediately visible in this more secluded part of the park. The woman flinched as if struck, but held her ground. Rising slowly, her hands held up in a gesture of peace. "I'm not going to hurt her. Sir, please, I'm not selling anything. I don't want money. My name is Harper." Her voice, though soft, carried an unnerving conviction that cut through the wind's howl. I saw her walking in a dream. It was so vivid it felt more real than this. I can help your daughter walk again." James froze, a toxic cocktail of pure, unadulterated fury and incredulous disbelief churning within him. That's an outrageous, despicable, cruel thing to say. How dare you prey on a child's fragile hope, you ghoul? None. Emma, however, leaned forward, her innate fear momentarily overcome by a desperate, almost desperate curiosity that clawed at James's own precarious composure. "How?" She whispered, her gaze wide and searching, fixed on Harper with an unnerving focus. Harper met Emma's eyes, a strange, profound empathy softening her own fiercely intense features. "I have a gift. Some call it faith-healing energy work. I've felt this connection before, this pull. I've helped others when doctors gave up. She hesitated, a flicker of old pain crossing her face. I once dreamt of a woman, an artist, sketching birds by a river years ago. She looked so sad. I drew a crude bird for her, and she gave me a small, worn coin. Harper's brow furrowed, trying to grasp at a wisp of memory. She said it was for brave dreamers. This fragmented memory, seemingly irrelevant, hung in the air. Enough! James snapped, his protective instincts flaring into a white-hot rage. We believe in science and medicine, meticulously researched, rigorously tested, not street corner prophecies from charlatans. He began to push Emma away, his movements sharp, angry, and final. Emma twisted, her small hand, surprisingly strong, gripping his arm with an iron will. Dad, wait. What if she's right? People like that exploit vulnerability, Emma. James said harshly, the words tasting like ash, though a treacherous sliver of doubt pricked him at Harper's unshaken, almost serene confidence. He'd seen that look before in Sarah, when she'd insisted on trying an experimental holistic therapy in her final months. They promise miracles for money, or worse, for some twisted form of attention. I don't want your money. Harper called out, her voice cutting through the increasingly agitated wind. The experimental stem cell therapy you're desperately considering in Zurich. The one Dr. Alistair Finch, yes, that Alistair Finch proposed, with its paltry 10% chance of marginal success and the agonizing, debilitating side effects documented in the classified trial reports. It won't give you the results you seek. It will cause more suffering. There's another path, Mr. Reynolds. A truer path. James stopped dead, the blood draining from his face. He turned back slowly, the well-dressed power broker mask falling away, to reveal the raw, terrified father beneath. His irritation was now heavily laced with a chilling, visceral unease. How in God's name could you know about Dr. Finch, about the Zurich clinic? That information is strictly, absolutely confidential. It's firewalled even within my own company. Harper's expression was unreadable, a mask of weary knowledge. I just know things sometimes. About people. About what's broken and what or who might mend it. A sudden, powerful gust of wind swirled fallen leaves around them in an almost conscious, deliberate pattern, a miniature vortex at their feet. Please, Harper said quietly, her gaze unwavering, piercing through his layers of carefully constructed defenses. Just give me a chance to explain. Not for you. For her. That unwavering gaze, that haunting hint of profound knowing, it reminded him so sharply, so painfully, of Sarah. Sarah, who'd always found hope, where he saw only insurmountable obstacles, who'd believed in things unseen. Against every rational instinct, against every meticulously crafted business decision he'd ever made, he found himself giving a curt, almost imperceptible nod. He didn't know, or then couldn't possibly comprehend, that this volatile, bizarre encounter was the precipice of a terrifying journey that would dismantle his meticulously ordered world and rebuild it on foundations he couldn't yet fathom. Foundations built not of logic, but of an impossible, fragile faith. The silent, vertiginous ascent in the private glass elevator to his penthouse office in the gleaming Reynolds Quantum Tower usually calmed James, the sprawling, indifferent city, his concrete kingdom laid out below. Today, however, it felt like a gilded cage, its opulence a mocking testament to his impotence. Catherine waited, her bespoke Armani suit and severe sculpted posture, an armor of unflinching corporate efficiency. A formidable file labeled Project Nightingale, Urgent Confidential, sat on her pristine desk. The board is beyond restless James. She began dispensing with even the pretense of pleasantries, her voice clipped like precisely cut diamonds. The Veritas Group is circling, smelling blood. You've missed 3 crucial strategic meetings this month alone. Your engagement, your very ability to lead, is being questioned openly. James loosened his Hermes tie, the silk knot suddenly constricting, choking him. I was at Emma's advanced neurological assessments at Mount Sinai, which incidentally leads to my other pressing concern. Catherine's expression, usually so formidable, so unreadable, softened by a barely perceptible degree. For a moment, the iron so was replaced by the concerned sister. You're chasing rainbows again, aren't you, James? Another miracle cure you found on some obscure forum. The unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air, like you did for Sarah, throwing good money after bad, fueling false hope until the bitter end. The neural regeneration gene therapy in Zurich with Finch shows significant promise. He defended the lie feeling hollow, fraudulent, even to his own ears, as he hadn't fully committed to that exorbitantly expensive Hail Mary option yet. 10% chance of minor improvement. James, according to your own heavily encrypted research files, I accidentally saw open on your desktop before you locked them down like Fort Knox. Catherine countered her tone, regaining its razor edge. More like 5 if we're being realistic, with a 90% chance of severe complications. Meanwhile, this company, our company, the one Dad built from nothing, is teetering on the brink because of your distraction. These acquisition offers from Veritas, from Omnicorp, they won't wait forever. Bernard Thorne is actively lobbying the other board members for an emergency vote of no confidence. He's making a play, James. She slid a thick, ominously bound folder across his obsidian desk. Hostile takeover defense strategy. Read it before it's too late. As she left, her heels clicking an angry staccato on the marble floor, James stared out at the city, a glittering, indifferent monster. Memories sharp and cruel assailed him. 3 years ago, Emma, a vibrant, fearless gymnast, cartwheeling across their sun-drenched lawn. Sarah, an artist whose infectious laughter filled their home, whose hands coaxed beauty from clay and canvas. Then the fall, the sickening crunch, the brutal, dispassionate diagnosis of a severe spinal cord lesion at T10. The cold, clinical words, likely permanent paraplegia. Sarah had been his rock, her relentless optimism, a fierce, unwavering shield against the encroaching despair. Then, as if fate hadn't dealt them a cruel enough hand, her own diagnosis, aggressive, insidious pancreatic cancer. 8 swift, brutal months later, she was gone, leaving him a spiritually bankrupt, emotionally ravaged widower, and Emma, a physically confined, grief-stricken child. Across town, in a different universe entirely, Harper huddled in the cramped, airless back room of a women's shelter, the scent of disinfectant and despair thick in the air. Her meager belongings, a single change of clothes, a heavily thumbed, dog-eared copy of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and a curious, ancient-looking bronze medallion were tucked into a battered second-hand backpack. The medallion, heavy and cool against her palm, was her only tangible link to a mother she'd never known, a phantom memory. Its surface was worn smooth from countless anxious touches, its inscription barely legible. "Rough day out there, child." Marion, the elderly, kind-eyed volunteer running the shelter with weary dedication, offered her a steaming bowl of thin, watery vegetable soup. Harper nodded, warming her chapped hands on the cheap ceramic bowl. "I met them, Marion. The man and his daughter from my feeling. The little girl, Emma. The connection was so strong, Marion, almost painful. Like a physical jolt. A shiver traced her spine, unrelated to the room's chill. And then, earlier, a man was following me. I saw him near the shelter yesterday, too. He had cold eyes like a shark." Marion sighed, her face a roadmap of worry and compassion, etched with deep concern. Harper's feelings, her uncanny empathy, and unsettling flashes of insight into people's hidden lives and futures had in the past led to misunderstandings, accusations, even threats. Her uncanny knack for knowing things she shouldn't, for predicting events, often unnerved people, especially those with something to hide. You need to be careful, child. More careful than ever. Especially with wealthy, powerful people like this Reynolds. They don't take kindly to interference. And that man you mentioned. You must report him if he approaches you again. Harper fingered the medallion, its intricate, almost invisible inscription, almost worn smooth, Fide moventur montes, sed prius cordi. Faith moves mountains, but first it must move hearts. She murmured the Latin words, a familiar, comforting mantra. It's not about me performing some grand theatrical miracle, Marion. It's about helping them reconnect to their own capacity for one. To open a door they've bolted shut. Her gaze drifted to the grimy window, to the uncaring city beyond. But that feeling of being watched, it's getting stronger. The rain was a relentless, unforgiving torrent when James finally exited Reynolds' Quantum Tower that evening, and the weight of the world pressing down on him. It soaked through his bespoke Brioni suit in seconds, the icy drops like needle pricks against his skin. He barely registered it until Harper materialized from the deep, inky shadows of the building's imposing granite entrance. Her dark hair plastered to her pale face, making her eyes seem even larger, more luminous. Mr. Reynolds. Her intensity, her sheer force of will was undiminished by the deluge. She looked like a drowned wraith, yet her gaze held him fast. Are you following me now? He growled, a tremor of genuine fear, not just anger, snaking through him. He glanced around instinctively for his security detail, Johnson and Miller, who should have been shadowing him. Where the hell is my security? No, I was just drawn here. I knew you'd be coming out around now. Before he could react, before he could call out, she fumbled in her sodden pocket and pulled out the bronze medallion, its delicate chain tarnished and broken in one spot. This was my grandmother's, or so I was told by the orphanage. She said it finds people who need its particular resonance. James stared at the archaic-looking object. Intricate engravings, worn lettering. He could almost make out figures, a mountain, a heart. Fide moventur montes sed prius corda. Harper recited, her voice a soft melodic counterpoint to the drumming, relentless rain. Your daughter? Emma needs this. I think it belonged to someone in your family line long ago. It feels connected to her pain, and to yours. More than I do right now. Look, James began, raw exasperation warring with a strange, unsettling flicker of pity for this drenched, clearly delusional girl. I appreciate the sentiment, if that's what this is. But my daughter needs modern medicine, not ancient amulets. I don't have an angle, Mr. Reynolds. Harper interjected, her voice firm, unwavering, despite her visible shivering. I have a purpose. I was guided to you. And sometimes, Mr. Reynolds, healing truly starts where science hits a concrete, impenetrable wall. Not instead of it, but beyond it, where the known ends and the possible begins. Her words so eerily reminiscent of Sarah's fervent belief in unseen connections in a universe more mysterious and interconnected than logic could ever explain made him hesitate. His hand, moving against his conscious will, reached out. Against all reason, against every fiber of his pragmatic being, he took the surprisingly heavy, cold medallion. It's not magic, Harper added quickly, as if sensing his skepticism. Not in the way you think. It's a reminder, a conduit perhaps. That hope can be an anchor, a lifeline, even in a storm as savage and unrelenting as yours. She pressed something else into his hand, a small folded piece of paper. A name. Someone who helped me when I was lost. He understands things others dismiss. Dr. Aris Thorne. He's unconventional. Thank you, James said stiffly, pocketing the cool metal and the note more to end the bizarre, unsettling encounter than from any nascent belief. Now please leave us alone, and be careful. This city can swallow girls like you whole. Harper nodded and then seemed to melt back into the rainy darkness as silently as she'd appeared. Just keep an open mind, Mr. Reynolds. Her voice floated back, a disembodied whisper carried on the wind. True miracles rarely shout. They whisper through the cracks in our deepest doubt. As James's car finally pulled up, Miller, his head of security, rushed forward, apologetic. Sir, apologies. Both Johnson and I were decoyed by a false alarm on the west side of the building. Someone tampered with the external sensors. Very sophisticated. James felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Decoyed, tampered. Or was Harper's appearance and his security's absence just a coincidence? At home, the penthouse was unnervingly silent. He found Emma asleep, a well-loved copy of The Secret Garden open on her lap. He gently placed the medallion on her nightstand and the inscribed Latin words catching the dim ambient lamplight. Faith moves mountains. For a fleeting, treacherous, terrifying moment, he allowed himself to wonder, what if he unfolded Harper's note, Dr. Aris Thorne? He vaguely knew the name. A brilliant but disgraced neuroscientist who'd ventured into highly controversial consciousness research. No relation to Bernard Thorne, surely the city was too big, yet too small. Morning light, gray and subdued, revealed Emma, eyes wide with a strange mixture of awe and curiosity, turning the heavy medallion over and over in her small hands. Where did this come from, Dad? It feels warm. Someone gave it to me. For you. Just a trinket, I suppose. He tried to sound casual, dismissive. The lady from the park, Harper, her perception as always was uncanny, unsettling. I dreamt, Dad. After you put this here, I dreamt I was running, so fast, through a field of wildflowers. Mommy was there laughing. A peculiar, undeniable chill traced James's spine. Honey dreams are just dreams. His phone, his lifeline, and his curse blared, shattering the fragile moment. Dr. Michael Landon, an old college friend, now a leading neurologist at Stanford, he hadn't seriously consulted in years, despite Catherine's previous nudging. Mike, what a surprise. It's early for you out on the coast. James, good to hear your voice. Listen, I've been reviewing Emma's updated files. Catherine, bless her persistent soul, sent them over at my urgent request some weeks ago, thinking a completely fresh, out-of-the-box perspective might help. I was hesitant to call until I had something concrete. There's a pioneering researcher, a Dr. Nathan Chen at Columbia Presbyterian here in New York. He's working on something truly radical neural synergistic stimulation combined with targeted genetically primed stem cell delivery. It's experimental high risk, but James, I've seen some early, very promising preclinical data and compassionate use case reports. Things they aren't publishing widely yet. James sighed, the weight of countless failed hopes pressing down on him. We've been down the stem cell road, Mike, several times. Dismal failures, each one. False dawns. This is different. James, fundamentally different. Chen's protocol integrates specifically tuned adaptive electromagnetic frequencies with genetically tailored autologous cells. He's seeing nearly 30% significant measurable improvement in severe spinal cord injury cases, remarkably similar to Emma's. Some anecdotal reports suggest even higher with particular patient markers. I've emailed you his latest private monograph and my own assessment. Talk to him. Today. After the call, James stared at Emma, still mesmerized by the ancient bronze medallion. The timing felt orchestrated, almost supernatural. Harper. The medallion, her mention of an unconventional doctor, Michael's sudden unexpected call about Chen, a cascade of improbabilities. Dad. Emma's voice was small, hesitant. Would Mom want us to try everything, even the things that sound impossible, even if they're scary? Sarah, his believer, his unwavering beacon in the darkest storms. She would, he admitted, his throat tight with unshed tears. She always said the biggest miracles hide behind the biggest fears. Emma held up the medallion, its bronze surface gleaming softly. Then I think we should listen to Harper, and this Dr. Chen, and maybe even this Dr. Thorne from Harper's note. An uncharacteristic rebellious impulse, a defiant middle finger to his purely rational, data-driven nature, made James nod. I'll call Chen today. We'll explore all credible avenues. Emma's rare, genuine smile, a dazzling flash of her mother's brilliance, was a balm to his bruised, battered soul. For the first time since Sarah's agonizing death, James felt a flicker not of cold, scientific probability, but of something akin to fragile, nascent, terrifying faith. He discreetly asked Miller to run a background check on Dr. Eris Thorne and Harper herself. Dr. Chen's facility, nestled within the sprawling, imposing Columbia University Medical Center, was unexpectedly warm, almost serene, with vibrant modern art adorning the walls instead of stark, impersonal medical charts. James, however, felt the familiar sickening clench of anxiety tighten in his gut as he signed the reams of consent forms, the exhaustive list of potential horrifying complications, a chilling lawyer-vetted testament to the terrifying risks involved. Emma surprisingly seemed more fascinated than frightened, peppering Dr. Chen with intelligent questions about neural pathways and synaptic gaps. The procedure is technically termed adaptive neuroregenerative biostimulation with autologous stem cell infusion. Dr. Chen explained, his demeanor preternaturally calm, his eyes astute, missing nothing. He was younger than James expected, with an air of quiet intensity. We're combining precisely targeted injections of Emma's own modified stem cells with carefully modulated adaptive electrical pulses to attempt to reawaken and coax dormant neural pathways into forging new connections. And the pain. The potential for catastrophic adverse reactions. The Zurich data showed a significant risk of immunological rejection even with autologous cells. James pressed the stark clinical warnings in the paperwork, screaming silently in his mind. Dr. Chen's gaze didn't waver. There will be discomfort, certainly. We are in essence forcing signals through damaged and currently unresponsive networks. There's always a risk of rejection or inflammatory response, but our priming protocol is designed to minimize that significantly compared to earlier generation therapies. Emma, he said, turning to her with a gentle smile. We can stop at any moment you feel you can't tolerate it. You are in control here. Emma, displaying a serenity that shamed James's own fear, nodded decisively. I'm ready. As technicians, quiet and efficient, began attaching a complex array of electrodes and sensors to Emma's thin legs, James retreated to the observation room, feeling utterly pathetically helpless. He found himself unconsciously gripping Harper's medallion in his pocket, its cool, worn metal a strange anchor in the churning sea of his anxiety. Commencing baseline neural mapping. A technician announced, her voice calm and professional over the intercom. Then, initiating stimulation at 10% of projected optimal frequency. Emma tensed her knuckles white on the armrests of the specialized chair. I'm okay, Dad. She gritted out, her voice tight, but determined, her eyes fixed on a Van Gogh print on the opposite wall. The following hour stretched into an eternity of rising and falling graphs on monitors, hushed medical jargon, and James's own ragged breathing. Sweat beaded on Emma's brow, yet she uttered no complaint as Dr. Chen and his team meticulously worked, guided by astonishingly advanced real-time neural imaging. When the session finally concluded, Emma was visibly exhausted, but impossibly luminous. Did it work? She whispered, her voice hoarse. This is just the very first step on a long, challenging path, Emma. Dr. Chen said gently, his eyes holding a cautious optimism. But your tolerance was excellent, and the initial synaptic response was noteworthy. Better than anticipated. Wheeling Emma out past the recovery suites, James caught a fleeting glimpse of Harper across the busy hospital street, a silent, almost spectral sentinel, before she vanished into the constant, indifferent flow of the city's humanity. I saw her too, Dad. Emma whispered, her eyes shining. She smiled at me. That night, Miller's preliminary report on Harper was thin numerous foster homes, a juvenile record for petty theft, likely survival-driven, and no known living relatives. The report on Dr. Eris Thorne was more unsettling, a genius neuroscientist ostracized for unethical human experimentation, involving altered states of consciousness and memory retrieval, now running a private off-grid research clinic somewhere upstate. The name Elias Vance also appeared, a former administrator of one of the foster facilities Harper had been in, dismissed under a cloud of accusations she'd apparently made. Catherine Reynolds, her Prada heels clicking with formidable, uncompromising authority, swept through the executive floors of Reynolds Quantum Tower like a Category 5 hurricane. 3 weeks into Emma's grueling treatment protocol, small, almost imperceptible victories. Fleeting phantom sensations in her toes, faint involuntary muscle twitches in her calves, had been completely overshadowed in Catherine's view by James's increasing alarming absences from the office. The Warren Kai terraforming contract, a multi-billion-dollar company-defining game-changer, hung precariously in the balance, and Bernard Thorne was systematically poisoning the board against James. Miranda? Catherine addressed James's perpetually beleaguered, caffeine-fueled executive assistant, her voice dangerously soft. Compile all company medical expenditures for the last quarter cross-reference, with invoices from Columbia Presbyterian flagged experimental or compassionate use. Sir, and anything related to Dr. Alistair Finch. I want to see the P&L impact, now. The figures when they arrived via encrypted data burst were staggering. Nearly $5 million and counting, siphoned from R&D slush funds and contingency budgets. This isn't just fatherly devotion. She seethed, her face a mask of cold fury, pacing her own opulent office. This is corporate malfeasance bordering on criminal negligence. He's gambling the company's future on a miracle pipe dream, just like he did with... She cut herself off, the ghost of Sarah's desperate, expensive, and ultimately futile treatments haunting her. With trembling fingers, she dialed her personal lawyer, a shark named Marcus Thorne. No relation to Bernard, she prayed. And then, with a heavy heart, the acting chair of the Reynolds Quantum Board. An emergency meeting was convened for the following week. James is emotionally compromised, quite possibly clinically unstable. Catherine stated to the somber assembled board members in the private dining room of the Pinnacle Club, her voice betraying none of the familial anguish she privately deeply felt. Bernard Thorne nodded sagely, a predatory gleam in his eye. He's hemorrhaging company funds on a highly experimental, statistically improbable treatment with marginal, unproven efficacy, while simultaneously neglecting his fundamental fiduciary duties. Reynolds Quantum is vulnerable. Veritas is preparing a hostile bid as we speak, likely with Thorne's silent backing from the sidelines. Thorne himself looked affronted at the insinuation, a masterstroke of deflection on Catherine's part, to paint him as the immediate threat, subtly positioning herself as the pragmatic savior. Therefore, Catherine continued, I believe it's time to consider an interim leadership change to stabilize the company. And, regrettably, I am also consulting counsel regarding temporary guardianship of my niece, Emma Reynolds, for her own protection from these relentless, agonizing, and financially ruinous procedures that are clearly not in her best interest. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Alistair Finch, present as a concerned medical advisor to the board and a known ally of Thorne, murmured his agreement about the therapy's risks. Bernard Stein, a board veteran and old friend of their father, finally spoke, his voice troubled. Guardianship, Catherine, that's draconian. Extreme even for these circumstances. Is it? She retorted, her gaze sweeping the room, daring anyone to challenge her. Or is it a necessary, albeit painful, intervention before he bankrupts us all emotionally, financially, and corporately, before he destroys everything our father built from scratch? She truly believed she was acting for James's own good, for Emma's long-term well-being, for the enduring legacy of Reynolds Quantum. Later that day, visiting a pale, sleeping Emma in her hospital room, Catherine noticed the bronze medallion clutched in the child's hand. She recognized the worn Latin. Another piece of evidence of James's emotional unraveling, his susceptibility to charlatans and false hope. Her resolve hardened into bitter certainty. She also noted an unmarked van across the street, a man with a telephoto lens seemingly focused on the hospital entrance. She made a mental note to have security investigate. Days later, James was a wreck pacing the clinic waiting room, juggling frantic company calls about a suspected data breach with arrangements for Emma's next intensive session. His phone suddenly exploded with a cacophony of critical alerts. Simultaneously, Dr. Chen's voice, usually so measured, so calm, crackled urgently over the intercom, the sharp with alarm. Code Blue, Treatment Room 3. Dr. Chen to Treatment Room 3 stat. James burst into the treatment room, his blood turning to ice water. Emma was convulsing violently, her small body arching impossibly off the treatment bed, alarms blaring a terrifying symphony of crisis. Her face was blue. What in God's name is happening? James roared, raw terror ripping through him. Severe acute anaphylactic shock looks like a delayed massive reaction to the stem cell binder agent. Chen commanded, his face a grim mask of concentration as he worked frantically alongside his team. She's going into a full-blown cytokine storm. Her airway is closing. We need to intubate now. Get the crash cart in here. Epinephrine, push 1 milligram. The next few hours were a terrifying, surreal blur of CPR, emergency intubation, potent life-saving drugs, and a desperate minute-by-minute battle to stabilize Emma's crashing vital signs. She was rushed to the ICU, her life hanging by the slenderest, most fragile thread. We must suspend all treatments indefinitely, James. Dr. Chen said later, his face gray with exhaustion and profound regret. Her body's immune system is catastrophically rejecting the therapy. Any further attempt could kill her. I don't understand. The preliminary markers were so positive. This reaction profile is anomalous. James sat numbly by Emma's bedside in the ICU, a silent, helpless witness to the array of tubes and wires snaking from her fragile, unresponsive form. Her small chest rose and fell with the mechanical rhythm of the ventilator. Then the final crushing blow, a curt, formal email from Catherine's lawyers, delivered by a stoic courier, formally serving him with the emergency petition for temporary guardianship and a motion to freeze his personal and company assets, citing reckless endangerment, gross fiscal negligence, and manifested psychological instability. Attached was a covertly taken photograph of Harper entering his penthouse. A nurse, young and hesitant, approached him timidly. "Mr. Reynolds, there's a young woman, she says her name is Harper, insisting on seeing you. She seems deeply distressed, almost frantic. Security is trying to remove her, but she won't leave." He found Harper in the harshly lit ICU waiting area, shockingly pale, swaying slightly, as if about to collapse. Dark bruised smudges ringed her enormous eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. How? How did you know? He whispered, devoid of anger, only a hollow, echoing emptiness remaining. I felt it. A sudden, tearing coldness. A sharp pain right here. She touched her chest. Like a cord snapping. How is she? Tell me she's okay. They almost lost her. He said the words catching in his throat. He sank heavily into a nearby plastic chair, the fight, the will. The very essence of him draining away like sand through careless fingers. It's all falling apart, Harper. Everything. My company, my daughter, my life. He was vaguely aware of a familiar cold-eyed man watching Harper from the far end of the corridor before melting into the shadows. Elias Vance. Harper sat beside him, her breathing shallow, labored. The medallion. Emma should have it with her. Touching her. It can help. James laughed, a harsh, broken, rattling sound that bordered on hysteria. You think that cheap trinket, that piece of junk metal matters now when she's lying in there hooked up to a dozen machines keeping her alive? Not the object itself, Mr. Reynolds. She whispered, her voice faint. What it channels. What it represents. Belief. Connection. Sometimes, Mr. Reynolds' belief is the only lifeline you have when the tide's trying to pull you under and drown you. Faith. James spat, the word tasting like poison, has been a cruel, sadistic joke in my life. Harper's gaze, though shadowed by exhaustion and an indefinable fear, was unwavering, fiercely compassionate. Faith isn't a guarantee of a specific outcome, Mr. Reynolds. It's not a contract with the universe. It's the courage to keep facing the storm even when you're battered and broken, even when you can't see the shore. She swayed again, catching herself on the armrest, her hand trembling. Are you all right? James asked, suddenly acutely noticing her extreme fragility, the translucence of her skin. She looked as if she were fading before his eyes. Just tired. She murmured, a strange, faraway look in her eyes. So very tired. Before he could press further, she slipped away, disappearing down the corridor with a quiet, desperate urgency. He had the deeply unsettling, profoundly disturbing feeling that her sudden visible decline uncannily mirrored Emma's own critical crisis, a bizarre, inexplicable, terrifying resonance. For 3 endless, torturous days and nights, James was a ghost, haunting the sterile, beeping corridors of the ICU. The guardianship, hearing a sword of Damocles, loomed menacingly. Emma, though stabilized after the initial crisis, remained unresponsive, locked in a deep, impenetrable coma, her EEG showing minimal, erratic brain activity. Desperate, broken, he drove aimlessly, eventually finding himself back in Central Park, drawn by some unseen force to the place where this nightmare had begun. Then, acting on a desperate hunch, he drove to the women's shelter. Marion, her face etched with profound worry, told him Harper was gravely ill. Pneumonia, the free clinic said. Acute. She collapsed yesterday morning, refuses any hospital care. She keeps asking for Emma for the medallion. He found Harper on a narrow, stained cot in the shelter's overflow room, her breath a ragged, shallow rasp. She was burning with fever. Yet her eyes, clouded with illness, cleared with a spark of recognition when she saw him. You came. Emma. She's not waking up. He choked out the raw, terrifying fear finally breaking through his carefully constructed facade. She needs... I don't know what she needs. But the nurses, they say there's a flicker, a slight change in her vitals when I say your name. Why? James finally asked the question that had been burning in his gut, a corrosive acid for weeks. Why us? Why Emma? What is your real purpose here, Harper? What do you really want from me? To help you. Remember. She rasped each word in effort, that even in the darkest, most starless night, the stars still exist. You just have to look up, believe they're there. It's not about the medallion itself, Mr. Reynolds, not its physical form. It's about the heart choosing to believe, even when reason screams otherwise. She coughed a dry, racking sound that shook her frail frame. The medallion, it amplifies intention. It belonged to someone. In Sarah's line, a healer. Long ago. She seemed to be reciting something from a half-forgotten dream. Impulsively, with a sudden clarity that cut through his despair, he said, "Come back with me, to my home. We have the best doctors on call. You can recover there. You can see Emma when she's stable enough for visitors." Harper studied him, her fever-bright eyes searching his. "You barely know me. I could be dangerous. People from my past, they might find me." Her eyes darted to the window. "I know you care about my daughter," James said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "More than most. And I'm tired. God, I am so tired of this fight being solely mine." As his driver, Miller, looking deeply concerned, gently helped a frighteningly weak, almost delirious Harper into the heated luxury of the car, James felt a flicker of something. Not hope, not yet. Hope was too dangerous a commodity. But perhaps a refusal to surrender completely. A stubborn ember glowing in the ashes. His phone buzzed. "Dr. Chen." "James, it's almost imperceptible, but there's a marginal, very marginal improvement in Emma's neuroinflammatory markers. EEG shows a slight increase in alpha wave activity. It's small, infinitesimally small, but, James, it's not nothing. It's the first positive sign since the crisis." Harper, now recovering slowly but steadily, in the quiet luxury of the Reynolds penthouse, under the discreet care of James's personal physician, was a quiet, unobtrusive, almost ethereal presence. Catherine's reaction when she found out via a furious call from Miranda was apoplectic nuclear. A homeless girl with severe pneumonia and God knows what other diseases living in your penthouse, attended by your private doctor while Emma fights for her life in the ICU, and you're about to lose your company and your daughter. This proves my point, James. You've completely lost your mind. This is the final nail in the coffin of your competence." She shrieked over the phone. "She's connected to Emma, Catherine. I can't explain it. I know it sounds insane, but she is. Emma's vitals stabilize when Harper is stronger. They dip when Harper relapses with fever. Dr. Chen himself has noted the uncanny correlation, though he can't explain it." James countered a desperate, wild conviction in his voice. The day of the guardianship hearing arrived cold and gray. James felt hollowed out, a mere shell of his former self. As he was numbly dressing in a somber suit, his eyes fell on an old locked rosewood box of Sarah's, one he'd never had the heart to open. Today, compelled by an instinct he couldn't name, he found the tiny key taped to its underside. Inside, beneath layers of faded letters, dried flowers, and cherished trinkets, was a thick, cream-colored envelope addressed in Sarah's familiar, elegant script, "My dearest James. To be opened only if I'm gone, and if fate has been both cruel and kind." With trembling, clumsy fingers, he broke the wax seal and read, "My dearest James, my love. If you are reading this, then my worst fears have come to pass. My journey in this life has ended. There is so much I should have told you, so much I held back, fearing your judgment, fearing I don't know what. Before we met when I was just 20, a terrified orphaned art student alone in the world. After my parents' tragic accident, I had a baby girl. I made the agonizing, impossible choice of adoption, believing I couldn't give her the life she deserved. I left her with the agency, my maiden name, Sarah Adams, and a small, simple bronze medallion, a family heirloom from my mother's side, identical to the one I later treasured, and which I believe Emma now has. My mother always said they were sister medallions, meant to find each other. If by some impossible miracle, by some twist of fate, you ever encounter a young woman with this name, born on February 12th, with a tiny, distinct star-shaped mole just above her left eyebrow, if fate ever brings her to you, James, tell her I never ever stopped loving her. Tell her I dreamt of her every single night. Tell her she was my secret, precious star. James stared at the letter, the words blurring before his eyes. Then, at a small faded Polaroid tucked inside the envelope, Sarah, impossibly young, radiant, holding a tiny swaddled baby. The baby, in the photo. It had a distinctive, tiny, star-shaped mole just above her left eyebrow. Just like Harper. He found Harper in the solarium, resting pale but more alert than she'd been in days, sketching idly in a notepad he'd given her. A bird, its wings outstretched in flight. The bronze medallion lay on the table beside her. "Your mother's maiden name," he said, his voice hoarse, cracking. What was it? Harper. Adams. Sarah Adams. Harper whispered, her eyes clouding with a distant familiar pain, then confusion. "Why do you ask, Mr. Reynolds?" James slowly, reverently handed her the letter, his own hand shaking so violently he could barely hold it steady. "February 12th. Is that your birthday, Harper?" Harper nodded mutely, her eyes widening in stunned disbelief as she read Sarah's looping artistic script. Her breath hitched. This can't be. It's not possible. The medallion, Harper. The name, the birth date, the birthmark above your eyebrow. My God, Harper. You're Sarah's daughter. My Sarah's daughter. Emma's half-sister. The world tilted on its axis, then slowly, agonizingly, began to right itself, reconfiguring into a new, astonishing, terrifying reality. The courtroom was a stark, intimidating arena of polished wood and hushed solemnity. Catherine's lead counsel, Marcus Thorne, a sleek, silver-tongued orator, painted James as an unhinged, emotionally crippled father, gambling recklessly with his child's life and the company's financial stability. Now inexplicably, irresponsibly harboring a vagrant with documented psychiatric episodes and dangerous delusions of grandeur. He presented Harper's juvenile record, expertly twisting petty survival crimes into sinister portents. The results of a court-ordered rushed DNA test between Harper and James, as potential paternal link arrived mid-session, inconclusive. Sample contamination suspected. Catherine looked momentarily triumphant, Thorne smug. James's heart sank. Bernard Thorne, watching from the gallery, allowed himself a small, predatory smile. "Your Honor." James's lawyer, Eleanor Vance, no relation to Elias, a fact James had triple-checked, interjected, her voice calm but firm. "We have new evidence of profound personal significance, and we contest the validity of that initial DNA result, demanding a retest with an independent lab focusing on maternal lineage." She presented Sarah's letter, its poignant words, echoing in the stunned silence of the courtroom. She then presented notarized copies of Harper's original birth certificate listing Sarah Adams as the mother, and a clear close-up photograph of the birthmark, identical to one noted in Sarah's childhood medical records, also submitted. "Ms. Harper is not a stranger, Your Honor. She is Emma Reynolds' biological half-sister, the firstborn daughter of the late beloved Sarah Reynolds." A stunned, breathless silence fell over the courtroom. Catherine visibly recoiled, her face draining of all color, becoming ashen spectral. The judge, Martha Simmons, a woman renowned for her sharp intellect, unwavering integrity, and deep compassion, read Sarah's letter and the accompanying documents slowly, meticulously, her expression unreadable. At James's desperate last-minute plea, and with Harper by her side, her presence now officially sanctioned as potential family, Emma, looking impossibly frail, but with an undeniable luminous spark in her eyes, had been brought into the courtroom briefly against strenuous medical advice, but with Dr. Chen's reluctant, heavily caveated approval. Suddenly, a commotion at the back. Marion from the shelter stepped forward, flanked by a determined-looking young woman with a press pass. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Marion asked, her voice surprisingly strong. "This girl, Harper, she's no charlatan. She saved my grandson's life, once knew he was choking in another room when no one else did. She has a gift." The journalist, later identified as Zara Jones, an investigative reporter for the City Chronicle, who had been tipped off about corporate espionage at Reynolds Quantum, presented a brief to the judge evidence of share manipulation by Bernard Thorne and payments to a lab technician at the facility that ran the first DNA test. Judge Simmons absorbed this, then addressed Emma gently, her voice softening. "Miss Reynolds, your father and your aunt are in a profound disagreement about your care and your future. Do you have anything you wish this court to understand?" Kyled Emma, small but surprisingly resolute, her gaze clear and focused, looked from her father to her aunt, then to Harper. Her right foot, inert for 3 long, agonizing years, twitched. Then again, unmistakably, a clear, deliberate, voluntary flex of her toes. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Dr. Chen, present as an expert medical witness, almost leapt from his seat. "Your Honor, this is entirely new. This is demonstrable voluntary motor function where none existed, post-trauma pre-stimulation, or even prior to the recent anaphylactic complications. It's remarkable." Judge Simmons, after a tense private conference in chambers with both legal teams, returned to the bench, her expression stern but thoughtful. In light of Miss Reynolds' discernible, albeit currently minimal, spontaneous motor progress, this court's grave concerns regarding potential corporate malfeasance and attempts to pervert justice, and this truly extraordinary, almost biblical revelation of familial connection, and the petition for temporary guardianship is hereby denied. The asset freeze is lifted effective immediately. She looked pointedly, severely at Catherine. "Ms. Reynolds, your initial concern for your niece was perhaps understandable given the information you possessed. However, family in all its complex, unexpected, and messy forms warrants fierce, unwavering protection, not opportunistic destruction. Further investigation into Mr. Bernard Thorne's activities and the alleged lab tampering is now mandated." She then addressed James, her gaze softening marginally. "Mr. Reynolds, the court expects absolute transparency and a measured collaborative approach to Emma's future medical care, with documented input from all legitimately concerned parties, including her attending physicians and, yes, now Ms. Harper as recognized next of kin." Relief, potent, overwhelming, and utterly dizzying, washed over James, nearly buckling his knees. Catherine approached him. After the courtroom cleared, her meticulously crafted composure shattered, her face a ruin of conflicting emotions. "James, Sarah had another daughter all these years. She never told me, and you found her like this." Her voice was a broken, choked whisper. "Oh God, James, I was so wrong, so terribly blindly wrong. I let Thorne manipulate me. I nearly destroyed us all. Sometimes the impossible just takes a little longer, Kath," James said, echoing Sarah's gentle wisdom, extending a hand to his trembling sister. "And sometimes it arrives in the most unexpected, almost unbelievable way." He then looked towards Harper, who was holding Emma's hand, both of them quietly crying. A new DNA test, conducted by an independent court-appointed lab, rushed and confirmed within hours, showed a 99.999997% mitochondrial DNA match between Harper and tissue samples from Sarah Reynolds. With a modified, cautiously optimistic, and radically slower treatment protocol, overseen by Dr. Chen, now incorporating Harper's intuitive insights alongside Dr. Eris Thorne's unconventional but surprisingly effective consciousness-focused therapies. Thorne, it turned out, had been Sarah's confidant in her final months, and the worn coin Sarah gave young Harper was actually a rare pre-Roman token. Thorne had been researching Emma's recovery began inch by painstaking inch slow, but undeniably steady. Harper, now officially recognized and embraced as Sarah's daughter and Emma's sister, became an integral, irreplaceable part of her care, her very presence seeming to accelerate Emma's healing. The bond between the sisters was profound, instinctive, a vibrant tapestry woven from shared genes, shared grief, and a fierce, shared hope. Catherine, deeply humbled and genuinely remorseful, redirected her formidable energy and intellect into supporting them both, ruthlessly excising Bernard Thorne and his cronies from Reynolds Quantum, and even suggesting Harper, once she was stronger, lead a new Reynolds Family Foundation initiative for at-risk youth aging out of the broken foster care system, using her substantial trust fund from Sarah's estate. Another secret: Sarah had kept a carefully managed fund established for her lost daughter, should she ever be found. Elias Vance, Harper's pursuer, was quietly arrested following Zara Jones's exposé on corruption within the city's foster care administration, a network Thorne had also exploited. Weeks bled into months, each one marked by small, miraculous victories. Emma moved from tentative supported standing to slow aided steps, the bronze medallion always around her neck, a tangible symbol of their shared journey. Harper, finally safe and surrounded by a love she'd never known, found purpose, using her own painful experiences and her unique intuitive gifts to champion vulnerable, forgotten youth, her voice, once hesitant and fearful, now resonant with quiet confidence and undeniable authority. 1 year later, under a brilliant, clear blue sky, at the grand emotional opening of the Sarah Adams Reynolds Memorial Center for Children with Mobility Challenges, funded jointly by Reynolds Quantum and Sarah's Trust, Emma, leaning lightly on a single, exquisitely ornate cane, walked steadily, gracefully to the podium. A year ago, she said, her voice clear and strong, ringing out across the assembled crowd, "A stranger I met in the park offered me an impossible, almost magical promise. That stranger..." She paused, her gaze finding Harper, who stood beside James and Catherine, tears streaming unashamedly down her face. "Was my sister Harper Adams Reynolds." She smiled, a radiant, joyful expression that mirrored her mother's. She and this amazing medallion. Emma touched the bronze disc at her throat. They reminded all of us that faith isn't about seeing the whole staircase, or even knowing where it leads, but simply having the courage to take that first terrifying step. James watched his two daughters, Sarah's vibrant, extraordinary legacy, side by side, his heart overflowing with a gratitude so profound it ached. The twin sister medallions, now reunited, were displayed side by side in a place of honor in the center's sunlit entrance hall, their ancient bronze surfaces gleaming, the inscription clear for all to see. "Fide moventer montes," said Prius Corda. Faith moves mountains, but first it must move hearts. That evening in the penthouse, raising a crystal glass of champagne, Catherine, her face softer, more human than James had seen it in years, toasted to Sarah, who always believed in impossible things and who found a way to bring her family back together, stronger and more complete, even from beyond the veil. Harper, standing by the window, looking out at the glittering, indifferent, yet now somehow welcoming city, gazed at a newly framed portrait of a young, laughing Sarah, painted by Sarah herself in vibrant, joyful colors. She added softly, almost to herself, and to finally finding where you belong even when you don't know you're lost. A single question still lingered in the deepest recesses of her heart, a whisper. Only she and perhaps Sarah's spirit could hear. What else did you wish for me, Mother? What other paths did you see, Vi? The future remained unwritten, a vast, uncharted territory. But for the first time in her life, it felt boundless, with terrifying, exhilarating possibility. A testament to a love that transcended even death and a tenacious, improbable faith that had indeed, against all odds, moved mountains, exposed darkness, and finally blessedly mended broken hearts. She knew her journey was far from over. An invitation had arrived just that morning. A letter from an old colleague of Dr. Eris Thorne, referencing Sarah's hidden journals and a legacy of visionaries, linked to their shared ancestry, a path that might lead to understanding the full scope of her own unusual gifts. The choice, like all important choices, was now hers.